And we're back in Inside the Ropes, and last month we started the Where Are They Now segment, where we track down a famous personality from professional wrestling that you want to hear from, and you want to find out their thoughts on their time in the wrestling business and what they're up to now. So we took a trip back in time to the WWF Event Center, because there was only one man that was known for that segment. He is the one and only Mr. Sean Mooney. Sean, welcome to the show.
Hey, Kenny, great to be on the show, and I'm really glad that you didn't name this segment, where are the has-beens? I commend you for, at least making some of us old guys feel better that it's just kind of like, where are they now? It's kind of like that Waldo.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we're here for. So, Sean, one of the things that I found quite interesting when I was looking into your career pre-WWF is that you weren't actually involved in the wrestling business before that. And I just kind of wondered, was there ever an interest in professional wrestling before you actually became involved with it? And what was your awareness of it beforehand?
Well, I've listened to a couple of the interviews that you guys have done on the show, and I find it interesting because I know a few of the other boys, had athletic backgrounds, but a lot of them didn't have wrestling background or were even, involved in it or fans of it. And, like when I was a kid and I grew up in Arizona, and they had, kind of like the old days where they, every once in a while, they would have a, some kind of a promotional, group come in, and they would go down to the local station and shoot the stuff. And I remember going to a few places like that because my grandfather loved that stuff. But, the time from growing up, from going to school and everything through high school and college, I really, didn't know that much about what was going on with wrestling or even what Vince McMahon was up to. So it was quite an education when I first was contacted, because I don't know if you know the real backstory of how it all happened, but I was working for Major League Baseball Productions in New York, and I was doing a show I was a producer basically, and I really was trying to get on television. And I was doing a show, I had a chance to produce a show with Joe Namath called Light Moments in Sports. And Joe Namath is, a very famous American footballer here, and he had, he was older, and he had really bad knees. He could barely do anything, and they need somebody to go out in the show to go out and do these crazy stunts. So I did, segments on riding camels and jumping out of airplanes, and they came up with this great idea. Hey, let's have them go to a wrestling school. It'll be really funny, So there was a place in New Jersey called the Monster Factory, and so we set it up that we wanted to go out there and do this story. And we went and shot this segment, and I was going to be, the idiot reporter who thinks that it's all easy, and and then they beat the living stew out of me. And literally they did. They beat the living daylights out of me. But it was a really good segment, and they appreciated the fact that I didn't, try and do what the other media idiots do, that I really put it across as what these guys do as athletes. And anyway, Vince McMahon saw it. He was on NBC local in New York, and I had a friend who I'd worked with at Major League Baseball who worked for him at the time. He had left baseball and gone up to work in Connecticut, and he said, I know that guy. And so Scotty called me and he said, Vince McMahon saw that show last week. He wants you to come up here. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? He goes, no, I'm serious. So he said, send your tape up and we'll see what happens. So I sent a tape up there, and anything for a few weeks, and then I got this guy a call from somebody and said, hey, they want you to come up for an audition. So this is when it was, it was just starting to take off. It was really, turning the corner there. It was going mainstream, and a lot of celebrities in New York were involved. And so I went up there and auditioned, just figuring, what the heck, at least it'd be an experience. And, they had a pretty standard interview for everybody. And I figured after I did the interview, I'm thinking, I just did what everybody else did. So I said to the guys that were doing the audition, because, of course, McMahon didn't, bother to come down to look at people until they really thought the guy was decent. So I said, do you guys mind if I just do something? So I cut my own promo, basically, and, talked about how it was time for people to step up and, join the WWF family and admit that this is the greatest thing. And I don't remember what it was, but he was impressed that I did that. It was just something different. And 2 weeks later, the guy didn't even have me come up again. He just said, they offered me the job, and the rest is history, and that was good.
As someone who hadn't been in the wrestling business before, was almost an outsider, what was that first night like, and what are your memories of that first night?
The first time was up in New Haven, Connecticut. That was my first event that I actually went to a live event. And I remember walking backstage, and Mr. Fuji and Axe and Smash were playing cribbage in full costume at this table set up. And I'm like looking at this going, what have I stepped into? You know, and then guys walking by, and, you know, it was like joining Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey. I mean, it was, you know, just like that. But as you mentioned, that you know, there was people, whether you were in or you were out. And I'm telling you, that first year was really tough because, you know, they have a different language, and if you're not in, you'd walk into, and these guys be talking, and suddenly they're speaking Carney, you know, and and it took me a year of just taking it, you know, and they put it to me. And I'll tell you, if it was, and this is why I think Lord Alfred Hayes and I became so close, because him, you know, Lord Alfred and Gorilla, or, you know, Gino, as we call him, took me under their wing. They saw what I was taking this stuff, and I never said a word. I didn't ever complain. I just took it. And those two basically took me under their wing and taught me the ropes, and literally, and took care of me. And it was about a year, and then I was in. And after, you know, once that happens, then you're in for life, you know. But it was a very tough period. I mean, that's when you had stuff going on backstage. You had guys that didn't know what the hell they were doing in the ring, and there was retribution, you know. And it was crazy time. It's a completely different world now. Completely different.
And when you were in the WWF for that period of time, one of the things that I guess over in the UK we might not really have understood it at the time, but if you watch any old episodes of Superstars or Wrestling Challenge and it cuts to the event center, you would do the local market promos for different towns. Now, I mean, how many of them did you have to do? I mean, that seems like it must have been a long day for you when you did them.
No, Kenny, it wasn't a long day. It was a long week. It was brutal. And I think that's why the event center didn't go on from there, because I don't think it was another human being who could do it. It was, we used to do, I mean, think about it. They customize, and this is when they were doing house shows every week, and you know, pretty much every day those guys were on the road. And they don't do that like that anymore. It's pretty much everything is television. You know, when they go on the road to arenas, it's for television purposes. But those guys used to do house shows, and that's how they made their living, from the gates of those house shows. So you can imagine how many dates they were doing. We would customize, on average, about 80 to 90 markets a week, and I would do cut-ins for 5 shows then, and I would do 3 separate appearances in each show. So yeah, it was brutal. And you talk about fortitude and building a voice, because you would sit there and you know, and you couldn't put that stuff in a teleprompter to read it, so I would have to ad-lib every market. And I would have a shtick or something for each, whatever the thing was. But at the same time, you've got to say each town different. You know, it's a different arena. It's a different time. You've got different guys headlining. So yeah, it was brutal. Yeah.
Good times.
Yeah, looking back, yes. At the time, no.
No. You told a story before when I was sort of looking into researching for the interview that I thought was quite interesting, because I hadn't thought about it. Was you were the first guy that really spoke to the UK audience through these segments.
Yeah, exactly. And because we were on Sky over there. It was one of the first things. And the UK was really the first market internationally that you know, before they started going into the Middle East and all the other areas. But the UK was the first place that we really started doing shows. And yeah, I was the first one who actually said, hey, and you know, and did that whole local market thing. And so Alfred and I went over there to a couple of shows at Albert Hall. You know, we went over, and I remember we were at the hotel. Now, in the United States at the time, you know, we were certainly known, and at events like that. But I remember we went over there for the first time, and we were in a lobby, and there was this big group of WWF fans who were in the lobby. And so we come walking out, and I hear them talking down there, and I can't remember who else. Bobby might have been with us or something. And they see those guys, and they, kind of spun off, and a bunch of people went, over there. And I just went over to a table with Alfred and sat down, and then all of a sudden there was this rush of people. And they said, it's the lad. I don't know. I guess they called me that. I don't know. But it was it blew me away because I didn't get that kind of attention in the States like that. And so I was like, people would, they found out what room I was in, and they put notes under the door, and, it was crazy. And that's why I remember coming back and telling Vince that I'm like, I don't know if this means anything, but those people are unbelievable. They love everything we've got. And that's when, and then it took off. And we were doing shows there all the time. I think I made 3 or 4 trips over there.
And then before you know it, they did a SummerSlam there with 80,000 people. So
yeah. It was awesome. It really was.
And I guess of that era, if you were mentioning how mainstream it got, but we'd be amiss to not mention Hulk Hogan because he was essentially the poster boy. So what when you got there, because if you got there in '88, Hogan was pretty much the top guy at that point. That's
after the movie had come out, Rocky, and and it was just insane. And I saw they had a show on, like the top 50 superstars of all time. And I think Hulk was like 25 or something. I was thinking, what? I mean, really. And unless you're just mad at him, how in the world could you, no matter what went on between all of that, how do you make him? I mean, like I said, I don't remember exactly what, but I just know it was really high.
He was 20. I think he was 23 in the list.
But yeah, okay. How do you not make him? I mean, at least top 5. Are you kidding me? And so I don't know. He really did. All of wrestling owes a debt to him for what he did, to put it where it is. So yeah, that just amazes me. But by the time I got there, he was a superstar. He was arriving in limos, and was making money at that time that was unheard of for a professional wrestler.
When you would do those tapings, and you mentioned that there was some guys that just got it, and you could do some ad-libbing with them. Can you maybe name a couple of guys that you kind of looked forward to doing that with, because you knew, right, they're going to get in there, they're going to do it, they're going to get out, and then maybe a couple of guys you would see them come in the room and you would just be filled with dread because you knew there was about 30 takes to happen.
Yeah, well, I don't want to put the boots to anybody that because there were some guys that it was just painful. But some of the best, Mr. Perfect was just phenomenal. Of course, Bobby Heenan, just incredible. Jake Roberts was just awesome. Shawn Michaels, even back then, was the Rockers. Him and Marty Jannetty did great promos. Like some of the big guys, it took them a little while, and that's why they would have Bobby with them. If you ever saw Bobby with somebody, that they had problems cutting a promo. So, I don't know, Tugboat or Yokozuna, or those guys like that, where you'd have to, they got better. Nowadays they have a school where they train these guys. It's like drama class where they teach them to be performers in front of that camera, and they learn before they ever get near the WWF, or WWE, I should say. They've already learned how to work angles in the ring as far as being someplace where they're in front of a camera and the whole thing, and it's.
And I was thinking, like, when you were talking about doing those sort of promos in the event centers, I'm guessing that guys like maybe Mr. Fuji or the Iron Sheik would provoke some sort of unintentional comedy, I guess, with some of the ways they would say things. Were they fun guys to kind of work with?
Oh, yeah, and then the Bolsheviks were fall down sometimes. I remember they did a bit with Steve Allen. I don't know if you remember, or know who he is, or remember who he is, a very famous American comedian. And they did a bit with a piano one time that was just hilarious. I mean, it could have been on, any comedy show. And So, yeah, well, those guys were always good, and then Aaron Sheik was unpredictable. You never knew what was going to happen. You know, there were some guys that they, like you worked with him, that you just you always just said, this could really go south. So you got to be ready. And, like Ultimate Warrior was like that too. That you never knew. You never knew what was going to happen. So, but it was exciting. It was, in the sense that, a lot of that stuff was real. As far as it wasn't said, okay, we're going to do this when we do this promo for this, that stuff happens, It really did. It was insane.
Well, around that sort of time as well, Andre the Giant was sort of winding down his in-ring career, and everyone seems to have an Andre story or two. So is there any sort of memory with Andre that sticks out to you?
Oh, yeah. And I remember one time at Madison Square Garden, we were there one night doing one of our monthly shows, and he was there doing a promo with Bobby. We were backstage, and you could see when you're next to him. I mean, no matter how big you are a dwarf. You're tiny. And so I'm standing next to him, and Bobby's getting them all fired up, and he does this, swings his arm out, and he caught me right underneath my arm, and I went off my feet. And I had the microphone in my hand because I'm took me off my feet, and we were in these back rooms, so they had all of these music stands and all kinds of junk, and I went flying into these stands, and you could just hear it, like the cartoons are everything, and then you see Andre look over, and they realized what happened in the control room, but it wasn't WWE people who really, they'd have people that had to direct the show. We couldn't have our people in there because of union stuff. So they didn't get out right away. They went away from the video, but you could hear Andre off stage say to me, you see he's coming over trying to help me. You hear him say, and he called everybody boss, and he goes, "You okay, boss?" And then the audio cuts out. But that was an Andre story. But he didn't mean to hurt me. He was just, but he was just so massive and strong,
And when you were on the road, who did you travel with on the road?
Well, I was, either if Alfred went with me or whatever, but I didn't travel all the time. I only went when they needed me to do something, and all, like pay-per-views, and so I would go with the crew from Stamford where we were based. And a lot of times they would have a jet take us, and we would have, because I would work right up to, whatever the deadline was, and then we would take off, and that was kind of surreal too. You'd go in there, and you wouldn't even see the city. You'd land on the tarmac, and then you would get in these cars. There'd be a big line of cars, and you'd get out of the planes. There'd be 3 cars, whatever, and you get in the car, and they would take you down into the arena. You get out and do the show, whatever, and the thing would wrap up at 1 o'clock or midnight or whatever it was. And you get back in the car, you go back to the airport, get back on the plane. You'd be in bed by 3 back in Stanford, no matter where we were. So it was that was surreal. And you wouldn't even remember what the city was because you didn't see it. You were in cars, and it was before the SUVs were popular. You get into these limos or whatever, dark tinted windows you couldn't see, and then you end up in an arena down in the bowels of some arena. You wake up the next day and you're like, where was I? What was that city?
And one of the things that I need to bring up to you, because everybody wants to know, what was Ian Mooney all about?
They needed another host on the show, so they didn't, and I appeared in the show in the event center.
So that's how it all came about.
Do you want me to tell you about my brother Ian?
Yes, I'd like you to fill me in on your brother Ian and how he came to be a part of the World Wrestling Federation.
He was a terrible, he still don't speak, but he was quite the heel. But it was. I love doing that.
Well, also, someone that kind of was almost synonymous with your WWF career was Bobby Heenan, who would, his character would treat the Sean Mooney character with all the contempt in the world. What was it like playing off sort of Bobby's jibes that he would give you, and what was the experience like working with him?
Well, we were certainly not going to be on the phone long enough for me to tell you Bobby stories and stuff, but he really is one of the genuinely most, the funniest people I've ever met in my life. And Oakland is right up there too, but they're different funny, Bobby was situational where, he, everything he did, it was just funny to me. I mean, that when we did the first Raw, and I know they've showed a lot of those clips with the anniversaries and stuff, but when we did that, the bit out in front of the building, and he had all the different costumes, he dressed as a woman, and he had the Hasidic Jew outfit on with, and the dress when he was dressed as the old Auntie, that was pretty funny. But when he had on the beard and the hat with the and when he was talking, he kept getting the beard caught in his mouth. And if you watch that tape close, you could see I almost lose it because it was just so damn funny. And there are things like one point I kind of step away because I knew I can get out of frame and people won't see me because he cracked me up every time I was doing it. And Oakland was the same way, for, like I said, different reasons. Gene would deliver a line, and I could have heard it 500 times, but he still made me laugh. He still made me laugh. The way his delivery and stuff he would say just would be, it was just perfect, And I don't think I ever came close to that. Nowhere near. I learned so much from him about, being in front of the camera and everything. But those two guys just, it just were phenomenal.
So back in '93, it was your decision then to go off and sort of do other things, and was there ever any? Because I know the inevitable question when anyone leaves the WWF is, are you going to go to WCW? Was that ever ever a thought to you, or was that ever something that they thought you were going to do?
Oh yeah, Vince was absolutely convinced that's what I was going to do. I don't think he believed me to the day I left that I didn't show up down in Atlanta. I really believed that. He thought for sure. He was like, okay, well, if you're going to do this, whatever. I'm like, Vince, I'm not. I just want to do something different. And like I said, I don't know if there was the company was changing then. There was all that stuff going on, and financially it wasn't doing great. So who knows? It might have cut me loose when my contract was up anyway. But I made the decision before that, and people, I think that's why people were also so just like, what the hell happened to Sean Mooney? Because how could you possibly just walk away and I disappeared in their eyes?
Yeah.
And but it was, for what it was in that period of time, I cherish that. I mean, I really do. And it really upset me that people, there were some reports of things that when I worked in news in New York, that I tried to hide that, from my resume, and I didn't tell people. And I'm like, how the hell do you do that? I was, on with the WWF that was aired all over the world, and I'm going to just tell people, no, that wasn't me. And besides that, I was very thankful to Vince McMahon for everything that he gave me, my opportunities that I got. And he even, when I started to anchor at WWR in New York, Vince sent me a telegram congratulating me, because I know he was happy in a sense, because here's somebody who worked for him and I was a news anchor. I was a news anchor in New York. So I think that he appreciated that, and also the fact that I was loyal. I looked him in the eye and said, Vince, I'm not going to work for your competitor.
But also, I just wanted to ask you, when you look back at that time period, is there maybe like one or two matches that you remember being in the arena for that you remember that stick out in your mind?
Wow, that's a tough one. I just remember so many, wars, those ones. Brett and Shawn Michaels and Mr. Perfect. Those guys just, I remember they would come back after one of those matches and just, all of the guys would applaud them, because they knew what it took and what they gave out of it in that ring. So, those wars were just incredible. I think like the Undertaker, some of those matches, I don't know. I mean, there's just a lot of those guys that I just hope that the fans out there, the ones who know what these guys do, appreciated some of those guys and what they did back then.
And like you mentioned, you actually came back for the 1000th Raw last year. Yeah. You did a backstage interview with Daniel Bryan. You pretty much looked the same as you did in 1993.
Yeah.
What was?
Well, I think everybody was expecting me to be some fat bastard or something, you know. Like, I don't know, but yeah, I've kept myself,
And what made you decide to come? Was that the first time they've ever asked you to come back?
I've done one other interview because I have some really good friends still there, you know, and he called me up like, you know, Mooney, we just do this one thing, and it was when they did a tape on was one of those, you know, but that was the first, you know, like live event thing where they had me come back, and they had talked to me a few years ago about coming back, and I actually went down and met with them, but it just never happened. It didn't come together. But the reason I did that is because of my son. At that time, my son was still, you know, he kind of discovered this as he got older, and he's, you know, a young teen now. But him and his friends really got into the WWE, and they all kind of knew that they thought it was cool that I was, you know, with those old guys back then, and he dug out some of my old stuff. But he really got into it, and he knew a lot of these, you know, guys were there. And so when they asked me to come back, I said, well, I'll do it, but you have to let me bring my son. And they said, okay. So I got to take my son with me, and we were there. The whole trip was probably about like 27 hours. You know, I flew to St. Louis, and it was so cool to be with him because, you know, going backstage, and they were just really great to me. And then they had like the Hall of Famers locker room. And I'm not a Hall of Famer, but they didn't have anywhere else for me to put my bag, so I got to go in there. And and so we went in there, and just to see, and it was just they brought back a lot of people, and you know, Roddy Piper was there, and Sergeant Slaughter was there, and Gene spent a bunch of time with us, and them telling stories about me, and they were just so cool to him. And like Roddy Piper, I think he wanted to adopt my son. I mean, he was just, you know, so great to him, and he gave him a shirt when we left. And then Joe, you know, with Action Smash, he had his the spikes from the days there, and so I got these pictures of my son with the you know, the shoulder pads on. And his son, you know, plays, I think, with the Seahawks, and he came there. So they had these NFL players there. My son's eyes were just, you know, gigantic for the whole time. And it was great to see Gene. Gene and I hadn't seen each other. Well, you know, I talked to him on the phone a few times, and he's good friends with the guys that I know that live in Florida, and they play golf all the time. But I hadn't seen him in a long time. Just, you know, sitting with him and talking about some of the other events because we were it. You know, and that was it. There wasn't other announcers. Howard, you know, did the ring announcing, and Gene and I were guys that did the backstage stuff. So, and he taught me so much, you know, back then. So it was great. It was a great event. I'm glad I did it. I had my anxiety, believe me, because I didn't know what it would be like on that. I hadn't been around those guys in 20-something years, 20 years. So it was a great experience.
Sean, thank you very much. Thank you for being so generous with your time, and I hope that you've enjoyed taking a stroll down memory lane with us.
No, I enjoyed it. You made me think about some stuff I had never kind of forgotten. Brought it up. So,
Sean, thanks so much, and hopefully we'll speak to you again someday.
All right, Scotty. You take care.